I never do interviews like officially for other people to view. I love doing deep dive conversations with the people that I work with my friends and my family and all this stuff. So I feel like questioning is naturally a part of my approach, but I've never done it in this way. So thank you, Danny, for taking part in this.
Thank you. It's true that we've only deep dove in private.
Yeah.
I'm excited to
Yeah.
share our conversations that we often have by the canal or in my living room.
Right. Actually, one of the reasons why, before I give my intro to you, one of the reasons why I wanted to pull you in specifically to talk about self and to talk about how you bring yourself to your leadership was because the moment I met you, before I even met you, the moment I saw you, I was like, oh, open, deep, love. Like I could feel that you bring all of your different parts of you to the spaces that you're in. And I could also feel instantly what that does for the people around you to see you being so you multifaceted. It was instantly an invitation for me to show up more honestly. So I really wanted you to be involved in this project and specifically around the topic of self. Thank
I'm
you.
very emotional. It's literally been 10 seconds.
Oh my God, I've been crying all week. Okay. Danièle-Jocelyne Otou.
Mm-hmm.
I've never said your last name, so I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right.
You have a cute little accent. It's literally like the molecule. O2.
O2,
Mm-hmm.
like the molecule.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to use your initially, or to start us off on your bio, your Insta bio, because it's like so perfectly, it's every single word is so intentionally chosen, which just makes so much sense for you. Human experience designer, community builder, equity seeker, founder of the female department, which is this space and platform for growth and for being for women, a place where women can discover who they are, but also expand even further. Leader at Apathy is Boring. What is your title currently at Apathy is Boring?
I'm the Social Innovation and Communications Director.
Ooh, it suits you.
Thank you.
You're also currently studying at U of Penn. You're doing a certificate, master's certificate?
It's an executive program in social innovation design.
Oh my God.
Mm.
What you will do with this life. I mean,
I don't know. That's the question. It's like, okay, well, what now?
It's such a beautiful journey of becoming and a journey of discovery of self. And you just, for as long as I've known you, which is honestly not that long, maybe 4 years, the more you pour into yourself, the more you pour into the communities that you're a part of. What I want to add to your bio is heart-driven leader, purposeful connector. You set the bar so high when it comes to leading by example. I feel like every single thing that you do is just purposeful. And as I was saying before, it's just such an invitation for the people around you to join you in leading by example and to set their own bar where they want to set their own bar. Just impact in all of your words, in all of your showing up.
Thank you so much. I'm like sitting with all of this. And I'm
good.
As you know, it's hard for me but I'm sitting with it.
Good.
Thank you so much.
I'm glad. So I want to give you an intro to Change Leader, to the themes, and this will get us into kind of, this conversation and how this all fits into the promotional schedule. But Change Leader is a collection, a learning collection, a leadership collection for leaders at all different levels who want to bring more purpose, more intention, more heart, not only to themselves, but to the culture that they're building around them. It's very much a collection about intentional, impactful leadership. There's a book, a toolkit, a self-directed toolkit that supports the book, an activation session, and then an executive leadership program. It was very important for me to meet people where they are in their leadership and learning journey. And the themes that are covered throughout Change Leader are the self, choices, and change. And that's really the approach to becoming a change leader. First, engaging with self, then contemplating very consciously the choices that you're making, and then inviting the people around you into this change with you. The promotional calendar of all of this over the next 8 weeks, or who knows what it will blossom into, 10 weeks, a year.
Years.
Who knows? The promotional calendar is going to follow the themes of change leader. So that first theme, the most important one, the most impactful one for me is self, which is really about connection to you. Specifically, the subtitle of part one, self, is tap into your identity and become a more loving leader. So I want to start us off with two very simple but very big questions. What do you love about yourself, Danny?
Ooh, that's such a good question. And I think you summarized, hearing you introduce me, summarize that really well, because I think I love that I'm so intentional about the way that I show up in my own life, in the lives of my friends, in the lives of my team, in the lives of a stranger I can meet. I really take the time to pour love into my work and into others.
It's felt.
Thank you. And I can only do that because I've taken the time to pour love and intention into my own life, as you know. So, yeah.
Yeah, that is going to be one of the topics that I want us to talk about, your relationship to you and your relationship to love, your relationship to pouring love into your life. My second big / simple question is, what change do you want to lead in this lifetime?
Actually, I thought about this during a meditation the other day. And I realized that, so for those who don't know me, I grew up in, predominantly white neighborhoods and spaces and, friendship circles. And so I've kind of always had that like outsider relationship to my networks and communities, but also a keen understanding of how to relate to them. And so I've always walked as a bridge or across the bridge of both worlds. I've been, very comfortable and familiar in predominantly white spaces where I didn't necessarily feel like an outsider. And then I've been, very comfortable in Black and POC spaces and BIPOC spaces. And so it's this quite unique experience that I've lived that I think makes me such a good bridge for both worlds. And that I'm really intentional about advocating in the spaces that I work in. And so the change I want to lead in this lifetime for me is very much serving as this bridge, and this connector and this gap closer.
An invitation. So tell me about your relationship with yourself.
My relationship to myself, I'd say is an evolving love story. It's deeply spiritual, deeply inquisitive.
I love that.
Deeply accountable relationship. And it's funny because in my head, I have to, I mean, as we all do, but I'm very intentional about like I communicate with my higher self and myself as I am today. And so when I say accountable and inquisitive and an evolving love story, it's very much between those two selves that
I'm
coexist.
laughing because I understand completely what you're saying.
And so, my higher self will, or myself as I am today, will constantly inquire about how to attain, um, higher levels of consciousness. My higher self will hold my current self accountable to becoming the person I say I am. And so it's a very fun, somewhat tumultuous, somewhat difficult, but always loving relationship.
How did you cultivate that early on? Did you always feel that your connection to self was strong, or was there a wake up? Were there multiple wake ups to yourself?
I think the base, as with everything, starts in childhood. Um, my parents were very loving, um, and my mother, my mother was very intentional about how she raised me. I'm the last of seven. And, I often share these crazy stories about, the crazy shit that she would make me sign up for, and that my siblings didn't necessarily have. She put me into, sewing classes and cooking classes and leadership courses and etiquette classes and anything that can help to channel the leadership potential that she saw in me, that she recognized needed to be channeled correctly or it can become chaotic at a young age. And so, from the ages of 12, I think, yeah, as of 12 years old, she very much um, made sure that I cultivated that relationship to myself and to my community and to God, because my mother is a very religious woman. And I think that that set a really strong foundation for the woman that I am today.
Mm-hmm. How do you continuously now engage in your relationship with self?
Um, I think that ties back to the first question, and in that I'm constantly asking myself questions. Am I happy here? What am I doing here? How am I
Right.
showing up here? Is this what I'm needing to do in this moment? Is this still serving me? Is this person still serving me? So these constant check-ins with self, but then also um, I laugh because my Reiki practitioner is always surprised at how quickly I act on or post session. So if she gives me some guidance of some sort, I'm quick to act on it, and I see results from that. And I always tell people, Reiki and all these like esoteric practices only work if you actually act on the guidance and if you actually do the things that you're called to do intuitively. And so my relationship to self, I think, has been cultivated by listening and really acting to these intuitive impulses that I feel.
Right. I can relate for sure. There's a section in the book that's titled "The Direction is in the Question,"
Mm.
and I think that I was always very inquisitive regarding what I wanted, what I needed, level of satisfaction. Am I happy here? Do I want more?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I wasn't always able to act on what I was hearing. And I often earlier on in my life would ask those questions from a place of fear, criticism, concern, worry, rather than a place of, love and compassion around what do you need? Beautiful being, what can I do for you? And then I started using an alter ego when I was about 24, which was a nickname that kind of like evolved into all kinds of different things. But this alter ego, oh shit. Oh no. We're good. I'm like already swearing. When you're frozen, but now you're smiling. Okay, I'm gonna give us a second. No. Yeah, okay.
Are we back?
I think we're back.
Okay, great.
Damn it. Okay, internet. Anyways, I started using this alter ego, and what I realize now with retrospect is that what the use of that alter ego did was allow me to question from a place of curiosity and love. Because, the questions that I would ask at that point were like, what does the alter ego want to do? Eves, what does Eves want to do? What does Eves want to say? What are Eves's desires? How does she feel? And it was very like, it taught me a lot about caring for myself to just ask the questions. But I think it was a very interesting just time of my life, because I realized that, we're so rarely taught to question. We're so rarely encouraged to question, I think. What do you want to do with your life? And what are your wants and desires?
Yeah, I think I want to be mindful that the ability to do that stems from somewhat of a secure childhood, or if not, a lot of healing. Because I think that for a lot of people, and if not the majority of people, this self-talk in our heads is very negative because of our social conditioning. Whether it be, our family, or for women, oftentimes it's just like living in the patriarchy. For racialized folks, it's, living in a system of oppression within the patriarchy. And so the ability to self-talk in a way that can lead to that inquisitiveness is not natural to a lot of folks.
Right.
And that's where, for me, the importance of healing comes in.
Right.
And reparenting, and
oh my gosh,
readdressing our inner childhood. And yeah.
Yeah, I was at a talk in last year, and somebody said something that just marked me, and it stays with me. It comes up all the time. Adulthood is the act of undoing childhood.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
yes. Yeah.
At what point in your life did you feel like you were an adult?
I mean, I had to adult fairly fast, to be honest, because I had a kid at 23. And so for me, that those questions, I think, they started fairly young, but my pregnancy definitely accelerated that process, because I really, really wanted to parent consciously, in order to not pass down, generational wounds and limitations and traumas. And so I had to force myself to have these conversations at 23. And obviously that comes with its own fucking reckoning, because that means that I didn't have a young adulthood. I didn't necessarily give myself as much compassion to fuck up, excuse my French, and to make mistakes. And I was very hard on myself at a very young age because I felt like I didn't have the choice but to be.
Mm.
So adulthood started young, and that came with a set of blessings because I am where I am today because it forced me to address certain things. But it also, yeah, led to me having to repress, I think, certain natural desires and stages of growth um, that a lot of people don't.
Mm. Mm-hmm. You've talked about consciousness a couple times, which is one of the topics that I wanted to bring up. What does consciousness look like in practice? You also kind of hinted at that, but what does it look like in practice, and what role does it play for you right now in your relationship with yourself, in your relationship with your son, in your relationship with your work?
Mm. I mean, I think I want to start by maybe defining consciousness as, for me, like awareness and consciousness are used interchangeably. I think consciousness is a deep level of awareness. And so, sometimes we hear the word and we're like, Mom, what does this mean? And it's like, for me, I use it interchangeably with a deep level of awareness. And so, in terms of my relationship to myself and to my parenting, it's very much a deep awareness and recognition of um, patterns,
Mm.
of cycles, of thoughts and behaviors that can often lead me to um, react in ways that I don't want to. Um, so yeah, so when I say consciousness, it really is just like, oh, catching myself in this awareness of, oh, okay, why am I feeling like this? Okay, this doesn't belong to me. Okay, I'm
Oh
angry
yeah.
at my child because my father was angry at me when I did this, but how do I actually feel about this?
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I'm very conscious of the fact that consciousness will be defined differently by every person, and I as I was writing about self, and as I was writing about being a loving leader and loving yourself more, I couldn't shy away from the topic of becoming more conscious of myself, and of my patterns, of the thoughts that were really the thoughts that were in many ways controlling my actions that I hadn't really chosen, and the titles that I was holding on to, and the parts of my identity that I was holding on to that weren't actually that I wanted to release.
Mm-hmm.
So in that consciousness, there's a piece there that is about becoming more humble and learning,
And unlearning.
and unlearning, letting go, like just being like, this thing I was holding on to so tightly, I can just be like,
Oh my gosh,
okay,
it's so hard for me.
I know.
It's
I
so
know.
hard for me.
There's another part of it though that is really just about like really loving myself, and being just wowed by my existence. And I'm not just talking about my existence, I'm talking about everybody's existence, just being like wowed by what it means to be alive, creative, the ability to love, the ability to grow, the ability to connect. Like consciousness teaches me to become humble, but also to feel so much more grand than my internal monologue would allow me to feel.
Mm. Oprah says, I always drop an Oprah quote.
Let's do it.
Like always. Like there's not one single interview that I have not dropped no quote. It's embarrassing. But I think something to the likes of like, humility is recognizing your uniqueness, but understanding that it doesn't come from you.
Mm.
And so I think to me that also speaks to like self-worth, and the importance of, when we're talking about consciousness, it's not always, recognizing the limiting patterns or the bad things or the negative thought. It's also recognizing, to your point, how grandiose we are and how phenomenal we are, but also, the powers of the universe that drive that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, remind me again the quote. So it's
recognizing your uniqueness, but understanding that it doesn't come from you.
Right. So that second part of it makes me think, because I only in this last year have been contemplating whether I have a relationship with God. And what it is that because I'm searching for something, I'm searching for faith. I'm searching for I think my core word in this life is belief. The potential of believing. I feel as though there are greater energies at play here, and I feel like there's potent energy when people bring good intention, love, creativity, authenticity. When they bring that to spaces, there's magic that happens around them.
Yes.
But when I hear you say that your uniqueness doesn't belong to you, was that the phrase? No. What was the second part of it?
Yeah. So it's like I'm all of these things, but it doesn't come from me. It's like
right. Doesn't come from you. That makes me think through my own lens. It makes me think of the fact that becoming more conscious of you allows you to become more conscious of everybody else as well. And once you start recognizing your own unique potential and individuality and power and creative juice and ability to love and to contemplate and to question, you start recognizing it in other people as well. And it's in seeing it in other people that you see it in yourself. And in that sense, that quote really resonates for me, that you don't own your uniqueness, because in fact, it is because you are part of this
and that
juicy, sumptuous, unique collective.
Exactly. And if you're unique, you're not unique because you're the only one in the world who's unique. You're unique because everybody else around you is in their own way.
Right.
And I think that I had a breakthrough with my leadership coach the other day, because as a leader, I have a very high standard to which I hold myself. And while I was digging through, I realized that stems there's a bit of like Christian guilt that comes into play there. And as I said, my mother's very religious and I was raised in the church. And there's very much over my head this like duty, and duty is very much the word. It's like a sense of duty to leave every person and place better after I have encountered it. And I remember listening one day to a podcast on, I think it was Super Soul. I'm pretty sure it was Super Soul. And she was interviewing the CEO of IKEA, or Rona or something. And he's a deeply spiritual man, deeply religious man, like literally like head of his church or something. And he was saying that his religious values very much drive his leadership values, and very much guide, and direct the ways in which he shows up. and in which he preaches love, and in which he preaches acceptance, and which he preaches fairness and justice and all these like inherently divine practices. And as a leader, I recognize that as well, that I do have this kind of religious upbringing that very much drives how I show up in the world.
Mm-hmm. Does that duty, does that drive bring you joy?
It brings me joy, but it also brings, it's a weight to carry. Um, and with my coach, I think what she allowed me to see is that it's really not my responsibility to leave every single person and place much better. I can contribute. I can make sure that I make people feel seen and heard while I'm in the space. But to take on the weight of leaving that space fundamentally better, or that person fundamentally better, is a big weight to carry.
Oh yeah, for
So
sure.
I'm unlearning that part of my upbringing that
Mm-hmm.
really added a bit of like savior mentality to my leadership.
Right. Right. I have a fundamentally held belief that that I have to challenge myself to put into action, honestly. But the belief is that, well, first of all, we are only responsible for ourselves, which is a line that I repeat to myself over and over, that I have been repeating since my separation from my marriage, because there is so much guilt, and there's so much guilt about, I don't know, we won't even get into the guilt, but the idea here is that, like, my belief that I hold connected to being responsible for yourself is that when you take responsibility for yourself, this is the best way to care for the people around you.
Yeah.
I have to challenge myself to actually do that, because care for self means downtime, saying no, boundaries, stepping away, all the stuff that doesn't look like caring for other people, leaving the relationship, leaving the business dynamic or context. So can you talk to that part of it? Because you posted, actually, you shared something the other day on Instagram that I know resonated for people. And it was about, the new busyness, essentially. Do you want to share that one?
Yeah. That's been like my learning of 2020, or unlearning. I like grapple between the two. But the quote was that in ease and at peace is the new booked and busy.
Right.
And I think that for me, for a very long time, being booked and busy was like the epitome of success. You know what I mean? It's like my calendar's packed, my clients are popping, my invoices are like rolling, and like all of these, I think, self, but also socially imposed constructs of what it means to lead and what it means to be successful.
Yeah.
And I think what 2020 did for all of us was fucking scrap that ideal and have us reprioritize what it means to show up. And that led to me, I have a team of 7, and it's been an ongoing struggle, I think in the middle of the pandemic, for them to see me impose certain boundaries, for them to see me say, we're actually not going to do this. We're actually, going to meet every 2 weeks now. And that created a bit of a tension in my team, because they saw it as like, well, we have all these projects and you're not showing up for us, and you're not supporting us in the way that we need to be supported. And I had to remind them that right now, today, my mission is to support myself in order to support them better.
Right.
Because if I feel like I'm not well grounded, I won't be able to show up for them in the long term.
Right.
So when we speak of sustainability also, like we talk about sustainability as being like, yes, climate change and like eco and all this thing, but I think sustainability also has to, tie in our human practices and whether or
Right.
not they are capable of leading us um, into clearer waters, into, um, more conscious spaces in the long term.
Right. Have you felt the ripple effect yet with your team of you setting that boundary? Their gut reaction was like, you're not here for us. Have you felt the ripple effect of them looking at themselves maybe and changing their own practices, or like what has happened since you've made self a priority?
Mm-hmm. Nope. Give me a sec before I answer that question. There are kids ringing at my doorbell. Boy. I definitely have. I think we're a year into it now, and I had to have some honest conversations with some of them, and have them realize that their sense of self-worth and identity and creativity that they got from our work, they now needed to make sure that they can get elsewhere, and that they were intentional about making sure that other areas of their lives are filling their cups just as much, because it's great to have such an invested team, but I also felt like, yeah, too much of us were our identities were too closely tied to our team.
Right.
And so a year later, a lot of them are painting. One opened a paint shop, one opened, they're just like exploring their creativity in different ways, and in ways that, they weren't a year and a half ago. One's become obsessed with plants. And for me, that's great. I support that fully, and I think it's important for leaders to recognize and acknowledge and support and encourage their teams' passions outside of work, because that'll only allow them to show up more fully and wholly in their work with a bit more boundaries.
I completely agree. Yeah. And I mean, those boundaries, like the sense of self, the sense of self-worth, the fact that their creative cups are filled, like that shows up in conversations and benefits the company, there's no doubt. But their ability to state boundaries impacts their ability to question, to challenge, to voice frustration or curiosity. And what's the impact of that in a conversation, in an honest conversation about where a company goes next, or a strategic conversation about what you're going to do over the next 3 months? Like, the impact of that is profound. And it's so interesting to me. I guess it's not interesting, it's a little annoying, and but people will be like, so what are your examples of, you do this culture work and then 3 months later something happens? I'm like, well, 3 months later people are frustrated and they're having difficult conversations, and some people have quit, and leaders have decided to take more time off. Like, that's the result, the short-term result of doing intentional culture work, to create space for individuality, to create space for needs. It's after, it's in the continued practice, it's in the rituals of continuing to show up and share from a personal, authentic place, that you can start having the challenging conversations about where things go next. But there's an initial, you have to reckon, you have to reckon as a team.
And that's, I think, like anything, whether it's individual or collective or organizational, or systemic, what happens before the benefits of the detox is the purging.
Right.
And purging is always uncomfortable. Do you know what I mean? Before you
yeah, totally.
The glowing skin, before you can get to the, I'm speaking like at a biological level, before you can get the, level of awakening and enlightenment, you need to do the shadow work. Do you know what I mean? And so totally. I always say that what we're facing right now at a collective level is very much like the shadow work of where we want to be as a society. And that reflects itself organizationally as much as it reflects itself individually. It's like you
Right.
have to be willing to have these ugly conversations
Yeah.
about where you want to go in order to get there.
Right. I completely agree. There's a line that I use often for intentional culture building when it comes to the leader's role. And I think the number one thing they need to do is be comfortable in the discomfort. And the way that you become comfortable in the discomfort and face it, sit with it, talk about it, not rush past it, hold space for it, is that you really need to have a very strong personal anchor. You know, you need to understand that you are you, you have your values, your beliefs, your opinions, your strengths, your weaknesses, that they are them. You know, and that's why this foundation of self is so important to creating an environment that's comfortable in change, because it means going through a lot of discomfort. You can only go through that discomfort. You can only make your way through it if you continue returning to yourself. This is my belief.
100%. And my team holds me accountable very often, especially within the last year. And I've really had to become comfortable with that discomfort. But then also, because my sense of self-worth is solid, I don't, I mean, I do take their feedback personally in the beginning, but I understand that it's not about me as a person. If they're recommending that we do things differently, whether it be as for me as a leader or as an organization, whereas I used to take it deeply personal and think that there was something wrong with me, now it's just like, okay, no, this is them asserting their boundaries. This is us having these conversations, and has nothing to do with who I am as Danièle-Jocelyne, you
Right.
know?
It's a good sign as well that they feel comfortable enough holding you accountable. It means that the trust has been built. There's some sense of safety. There's open communication. It's not going to be, this is not easy stuff for sure. It's not the easy route to bring yourself to work,
Yeah.
I want to end on a question that's a little bit more tactical and directly connected to this. The title for you of human experience designer. How do you build an environment that supports, or how do you design an environment that supports humans through change?
I love that question. It's such a good question. And I'm a firm believer in the process of design thinking, and I use design thinking all the time, everywhere, and anything. But the reason why I use the term designer, and I'm studying social innovation design, and it's a very intentional term because it's a process. Design is a process that first and foremost begins with deep empathy and the ability to listen, really, really listen to the needs of another. And then, based on what you're hearing other people telling you, you are able to co-create an environment that takes into account the needs of different people. And designing at its core is inherently inclusive. It's inherently equitable. It's just, it's fair, because it takes quite literally the needs of everybody in a space into account in order to design a solution that, serves the people. And so I think for me as a designer, first and foremost, it's always like, what do you need? Or what do the people in a space need? How do we make sure that everybody feels seen? And then we co-create together.
I love the fact that you're talking about process and putting structure to all of this, because I think people shy away from culture work, from change leadership, from change management, from newness, because it feels too soft. There's misconception that this work is like very intuitive and highly emotional, and and it is, because it involves humans. There's emotion and intuition that will be involved, but there's a process and a structure to all of this that you can trust, and you have to trust the process of this, which includes that purge, which includes the discomfort. And yeah, so there's a big part of that trust that's going to come from your own sense of self-worth, your connection, your relationship with yourself. But there's another part of that trust that comes from that co-creation process of really inviting people in, and being like, we are doing this together. And I don't want to do it alone,
I think there's just this I don't know what I was reading or listening to the other day, but they were talking about how, diversity, equity, diversity, and inclusion is a practice that really, it's probably like the only practice in the workplace that requires us to, or the humans involved, to really do, shadow work. It's transparency work. It is transparency work, but there's vulnerability work, there's grief work, there's mourning work, we think of EDI as like this practice that you can just like apply as a process, which you can, but in order for it to be truly transformational and not just transactional, it really requires us to show up in the workplace in ways that we've been able to compartmentalize up until now, and it's just been like, okay, well, I do shadow and grief work and vulnerability work at home and like my personal development, but I don't necessarily need it in my professional life. But truly transformational leadership and culture work actually requires us to merge both worlds in deeply uncomfortable and vulnerable ways. But I fundamentally believe that that's the only way.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Shape how we go forward.
Return to our humanity and create space for the human experience of all of this, of the building and the working and the living and the loss.
Yeah, and how these show up in the workplace.
Right.
And not just compartmentalizing humans as like, well, this is work, this is home. But it's like, no, you're a full human showing up at work. So how is the workplace making space for folks to show up wholly, and not just as like these kind of half-headed creatures?
You're such a wonderful example. I'm going to end where I started, of someone who shows up wholly in ways that feel safe for you, with the facets, all of the facets. And I really have experienced the environment that creates for other people. So thank you for being you. Thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for taking the time with me. I feel filled up from this conversation.
I feel filled up from all of our conversations, every single one. You're so great, and I'm so proud of you. And I love that you're doing this.
Thank you. I can't wait for you to dig into it.
I will this weekend.
No pressure. No rush, no pressure.
I'm like so excited.
I love you.
Love you.
Okay, I'm going to stop recording.